We invite everyone to our roundtable discussion, which is in fact a stage rather than a roundtable, so we'd better call it a panel. We are glad to see you here, especially we are thankful to those who are doing lots of effort to be here after lunch and not to fall asleep. And still, we are glad that you are using this opportunity to ask questions and listen to our answers. So today we would like to listen to continue this conversation, which started during Mikhail's presentation on how to motivate people, on how to move the team forward. And I would like us to consider self-motivation as well, because maybe we have such situations also. If anyone in the room has any comments or uh, recipes or any stories, any recommendations for us to follow, this is something we would highly appreciate. I know that you, Vladimir, have this experience that people are staying at your company for quite a long time, so you don't have any big churn rates. Well, it's difficult for me to explain why exactly this is happening. This is just a result that we are observing. While trying to answer this question for my own purposes, I try to read on this topic once again to understand why people behave in some particular way. Maybe we should split motivation into several parts here. So motivation as something for which people work. And the most obvious answer is they work for money to get their wages. One more answer would be for enjoyment, just because they like what they are doing. So we can go deeper and see money as a transformed survival instinct, the basic instinct. And the fact that a person may like a particular job is maybe because they have some previous history. They are like that, and we do not have we do not have much leverage here because we cannot increase the salaries indefinitely because otherwise the business will be unprofitable. And also, some people just don't like translating that much. Maybe they want to produce cheese, and that's been their dream for their entire life, and they cannot do anything about that. So the only thing that we can work on is something higher than that, like the social motivation, for instance. To which extent do people perceive their offices not only the place where they earn money, but also they are starting to get this feeling of a family, a feeling of communion with people, and they miss that when they leave their job. That's a highly important factor, and many people underestimate it. They think, okay, we will be just paying money and that's enough. But that isn't enough, because the feeling of a person as a member of a team, anthropologically speaking, that's the feeling as a part of the tribe or like a part of a pack, like a pack of wolves. So, of course, these two factors are important, the pay and the job itself. The factor number 3 in this hierarchy is the satisfaction level with the quality of relations on the team. And also, This works in companies under 50 people. It's highly important to remember that. Um, if the company is bigger than that, it's difficult for one leader to hold contact with every person. Sometimes we are getting this situation when we are in our office, we have our employee and we don't know their name. Unfortunately, this happens. So in this case, we rely on a kind of corporate mythology, some higher purpose, which is not always well defined, but there is a general perception that we are one of the best companies, we are present at conferences, and sometimes we feel emotional about our logo, about our name, about our mission, vision, etc. That's our corporate mythology. And this partly depends on the size of the company. And the bigger it is, the more we have to care about the social issues and mythology. And at the time when you were smaller than 50 people, did you have to strengthen these connections with weekly beers, for instance, like Mikhail does? Well, I was lucky about that. I was quite conscious about that. I didn't have the plan to strengthen connections between people. I didn't plan any activity if a particular person is losing contact with me. There was no systematic approach. I was not following any predefined plan. There were no guidelines that I would be following. So that's just your intuition and the result of the books you read. Yeah, that's intuition. That's the algorithms of thinking which we do not consciously realize. It works, but we don't know exactly how it works. So in my case, it just happened this way. I don't know exactly what's the mechanism behind that. Leonid, how do you have it arranged in your company? Well, first of all, we saw lots of that. First of all, because over the long years, our company was growing considerably. Also, we have a number of offices which are in different regions and in different cultures, even. Sometimes those cultures are even incompatible. I'll give an example. We have an office in South Korea, and that's a place where people feel different and people behave different. So even China is much closer to our relaxed Soviet worldview, but in Korea, in Japan, their approach and work ethics is totally different. It's not like I mean that they are perfect people. No, they aren't. But in some cases, they are ready to deceive you. In other cases, they just behave totally different than we do. And of course, I cannot be present at every office all the time. I haven't learned to clone myself. Therefore, sometimes I do not recognize people, just as you mentioned. And for instance, in Kiev, there are 15 to 20 people, but in Moscow, there are over 100 people. So inevitably, they perceive this as just another big office. They do not have any higher goals. They are just working there until they find something better. And that's very different from the small team that was building it, that has some common story behind that. And they are just joining a big office which has its culture, its values, its HR system, etc. But I don't believe that some kind of fetishism is at work here, that people really have strong attachment to those things without soul, like the logos, titles, etc. So the thing that I saw in major California companies, people have quite relaxed attitude to that, although the company is spending lots of effort to make people attached to those corporate symbols. This simply doesn't work. So what does work? Well, in our case, that's the systematic attempt on the part of the HR to support certain corporate culture built on ethic values. So, if we mean a big office of 100 plus people, where people don't always know each other, there is inevitably some formalized approach, and in all of them, there is this approach of competition, of KPIs, of people comparing themselves with others, just waiting to take on their position. And we've noticed in other companies that the KPI was arranged in such a way that the manager of the department was getting all the best clients, and she was not stimulated to take care of the success of the department as a whole, which means that she would rather put all the other employees in a shade. And personally, for her, this was beneficial, and for the company, this was detrimental. So that's an example of the use of one's office, one's position. So the first thing we should care about is that our KPIs do not make people rivals or enemies. Also, our HR takes care about culture. And for instance, if you are assisting your colleague, that's a huge benefit. And this is something that we cannot always reflect in the KPIs. So people do understand that they won't be encouraged for let's say blaming their colleagues, reporting on their colleagues. Of course, if there is some problem, we need to deal with it together, but it shouldn't be like it is arranged in some companies. Like, for instance, if it is forbidden to eat at one's desk, and one person just happened to do that because of the lack of time, and someone reported on him, and that person just happened to have no time, and that person was in fact assisting in the success of the company, and that other person gets a benefit. So while the KPIs enable this possibility, uh, and also taken into account one more thing which we probably don't always understand. There is also this aspect of immaterial motivation, like let's say recognizing a person, recognizing the effort for postmortem communication with the client. So in Soviet Union, this was used quite extensively. Yes, Tatiana, and you will be surprised maybe, but all the major American corporations are using this as well. And at the desks of the employees of those companies, there are these small plates, quite similar to the plates we would get in the Soviet Union. But it's just the text that is different, like client service of the year, or like winner of the corporate swimming competition, etc. This won't guarantee people's loyalty, but it surely contributes to it. And also, motivators should be different, because if sometimes you are using KPIs to encourage people to do certain things. Like, for instance, if there is a salesperson who performs below 60% of what they are expected to do, well, that's a good reason not to pay any premiums to them. So, yeah, this does not work in Asia or Korea because they are addicted to their labor. They would go to work on weekends just to finish the things that they haven't finished yet. So in those cases, we should employ a different approach than we use in Europe or in America. We need to support the people who, for instance, have not performed according to the plan, because that can become a personal tragedy or maybe even a reason for suicide.
Thank you. Stas, you have a brilliantly motivated team with the many years of motivation that doesn't expire, and everyone can see that it all works well, non-stop, and everything is done, and it looks nice, and it is nice indeed. What do you do with them? I would like to support the previous speaker. Of course, it's about the corporate culture. That's the most important thing. I'm not sure about these metal bars that they use in the Silicon Valley. We don't hand them out. That doesn't work anymore. Well, I have this comment about these awards. I, when I was using the word mythology, I meant the corporate culture. I didn't mean any formal signs like logos or the flags or these metal bars as awards. All of this does concentrate the attitude of the employees if they like it there, if they love the company, and if they enjoy it, they will actually treat these symbols the same. But if the environment is not supportive, then any flag on the table, on the desk, would really provoke the aggression spree. But I know what I'm talking about because I've had the experience. Because you would not be able to artificially inspire or motivate with the symbols or logos anyone. Even the motivation trainings would not help if the corporate culture is not proper. Well, the corporate culture must be installed somewhere, and the carriers of the corporate culture, of course, these are the humans in the company. So, what shall the corporate culture be like? What shall it include? I think this is the atmosphere of trust and respect in the first place. I mean, respect to the otherness, respect to different opinions. It doesn't imply that he thinks wrong. It means that I think differently and he thinks differently. And the two of us, we might be looking at the same picture from a different perspective. I mean, the respect for the other's opinions and also the trust. There is no this presumption of innocence. I initially, by default, I trust my colleague because I know that we are working for the same goal, and I trust him or her. It actually adds to the capacity of the team that is not possible to take from anywhere else. You can think of any other examples in the West and also in the Soviet Union back then. There was much trust around. Children were spending time in the yard and they were visiting each other. But if you have trust, then everything works fast. But if you talk in academic terms and if you talk in sophisticated ways, there is this three-vector diagram. Is this the roundtable about motivation, isn't it? I'm sorry. this vector diagram of motivation includes three sections, three parts. This is interest, support, and coercion. So whatever we mentioned, it can be divided into these three categories. So KPIs will be like, the backup detachment following from the battlefield. This is wrong. This is support. This is corporate culture. This is just human relations. As to the interest, these are the goals. These are about the goals that the company sets and whether the employees share the goals or not. If at least one of the components is missing from this vector diagram, the motivation will be undermined. Like everything seems fine with us, but there is no interest. This will be just the happy cats. Or also you may have this support from this retreat blocking detachment or anti-retreat unit. Well, I would think back of the old quotation, you might achieve everything with the help of a kind word and a gun. Well, that's exactly the thing. Well, give me another 3 minutes and I will say it. Well, jokes apart, and talking beyond the corporate culture, my hunch is that the most important element of the corporate culture is when the employees can be oriented towards each other. If you know and can do this, if you know how to do this, please help another one. You always have two options. Either you do yourself much better, you perform much better, or you help another one. It's very important to help others because for us, as for companies, it will be much better on a global scale if we have two employees doing things well rather than having one employee doing things well and fast while the other one would not be able to do this because nobody teaches him how. But also, you don't need to read the books or the manuals, but you need to have the mentor, the coach that would lead you through. And also, Vladimir had it right. Of course, we are not able to pay the much higher salaries than in the industries. This is really not very possible unless we have a very good client that can cover it all. We are not able to offer some of the super conditions. We're not able to provide for the same level of bonuses and proxies as in big corporations where they have free food and the gym because they have it. Uh, there are certain limits that the smaller companies would not overcome. However, we still can afford many more things. These are the organizational things, the organizational stuff. We either can make people more free or not prohibit things to them, and this is free of charge. For example, we have project managers. They work with customers in different time zones, from the Far East to the West Coast. If the project manager does not need to be present at the workplace at 10 a.m., why do I need him? Maybe it would be much more convenient for me to have the project manager there at 10 p.m. because they work with a client with this time zone. So it would be much more convenient for me to have it like that. There will, of course, be some mandatory hours, office hours, when everyone must be there to please the managers. But why do we take this freedom away? Many people find it very important because elsewhere, of course, they are paid more, they might be paid more, but they must be there at their desk at 9 a.m. But things happen. The car might be broken or your child got sick. Well, this flexibility, when it's not penalized, it doesn't cost anything to us as a company, but it helps a lot. Another point, and Fyodor mentioned, this is the thing that is absolutely not understandable. I can explain. Since people understand the language of each other, I would talk about the Kyiv office. We had it in the suburbs of Kyiv. It's Ushinskoe Street. This is the terrible thing to commute. No subway. You can only take a bus there. Also, in the Moscow office, it was so because we're trying to save the money. Because if you get as the closer you get to the metro station, it's getting more expensive. Then actually there was crisis in Ukraine, and Fyodor moved to the city center because the rent was basically the same. And then it turned out that the loyalty of employees has increased tremendously because people would come to work at all weathers. So either they didn't feel comfortable to take a long walk. For example, the ladies with the high heels on the cobblestones, especially when it's raining or cold, or taking their bags around because not everyone is driving. So it turned out like a small investment into a more comfortable office that was located closer resulted into a higher loyalty of the employees because you can spend more time in the office, like 8, 9, 10 hours. You spend a lot of time there, so you should feel comfortable. So if we pay 20% more for a more costly office, this is not a huge cost on employee scale terms. But if the office is spacious, well ventilated, they will feel much better. Oddly enough, there is no direct link. However, the loyalty does boost. Well, thank you. Misha, can you add more on the basis of what you heard? Do you have any comments? Maybe you are doing any things like this or not doing? Well, it's all very similar, except for the large corporate proxies. I do agree with Irina that we are very flexible in terms of approach. If a person needs to go to see a doctor or something happened to the child, we are very flexible about this. We did our best. When a person is sick or maybe has a stomach bug or whatever, this is not going to impact the performance because all of the processes that we have can be operated remotely. Well, this is just a human attitude, right? Of course, yes, of course. We can hear them, we can understand them. It's all very simple to me. If I don't take care of them, they would not be taking care of my company. These are very mercantile human relations. No, these are normal human relations. I can hear you, they can hear me. This is like mirroring, of the world. If you give out to the world gives back to you. I don't see any mercantile attitude. This is so easy to understand. I don't get why other people don't understand this. I think we do. I think we do. Yes, fine. Well, there is nothing new under the sun, and I do support everything that Leonid mentioned and Misha said. Well, our office hours start at 9 a.m. formally, but in fact, nobody is ever checking when people got to the office. I might not even notice that the person is not there. Even the manager might not notice. This can only be noticed when they blew the deadline. This is when they start looking for a person. Otherwise, everything is evolving around the production needs. So, well, the production need might be to have a person at 9 a.m. at the desk. There is no such any reason. So why forcing them? The same concerns about this free leg principle. Any other things you would like to add, except for the comfortable office to have or the free hours? Or maybe you let people go when the child is sick. Do you have anything else? Maybe you can have anything else more than the human relations. Yes, of course, there is something. Some things need to be developed, especially when you have many people, when people don't know each other in person. For example, of course, you can calculate this. Of course, it might be considered a bit artificial, but people can accept this. We have a custom in all offices. Well, in small offices, it's okay. A person actually invites everyone for a drink. In big companies, we still keep this custom. I understand that we might have birthdays every day, and I realize that sometimes you even have to spend more money to buy more pizzas. But of course, not everyone is present at the desk on the day. But the advantage is that this is something that brings people together. You have been told some nice words. People at least know how you look. They just came there to get a cookie, but they finally met you. These horizontal links, horizontal relations, this team building is important to have. like maybe this person is not never going to work directly with you, but he saw you or she saw you. As far as the 3 hours is concerned, I don't agree that the deadline is most important, because you know the threshold is much early, and Fyodor had it best. You might stay at home because you're sick or you don't feel well and you have a headache, or maybe you need to get the new uh, washing machine delivered in the morning and you need to stay at home. But if you need to have some operational stuff done immediately without delay, for example, you must answer the email. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. It's all. Well, I need to highlight these things. It's not that the deadline is important. If you're only oriented at the deadline, we will lose the discipline. Of course, it's out of question. You have the remote access to through the cloud to email, to files. You could be on the bus, but if you must answer the client and you must do this within 30 minutes, you must do this from the bus. Of course, you could go to the gym, but that implies then when you do the squats you 50 times, you need to check your smartphone. What is going to happen if they fail to answer the client within 30 minutes? What are the counter motivating factors? It's all very easy to handle. Of course, there's a high chance that nobody notices. Well, it's important, but it's important to have. For example, it's an important mail. Well, the manager or the next level superior, for example, Fyodor, notices this, and actually he has the KPI unticked. We actually have it on the KPI, the request processing time, and it must not only be the request as such, but also to the point. Or if it's a complicated matter to have, you must answer and reply saying that it's a complicated matter, but I will answer by this time. Then this person, if he or she fails, he will get a minus in the KPI for this late reply. Of course, you can also deserve a proxy in the KPI. It's not really the problem with punishing. These are not all of them. They're not penitentiary. You know, the proxies are still there. Maybe you have a better word. Yeah, these are not only sanctions. But if a person came up with something, for example, the optimization solution, because some processes were too slow, or maybe he told something to do some other things, or maybe you need to have the loads of quality insurance job. But if the person is ready to assist and to help, and maybe they need to have it done fast, and he would join in and help. This is the proxy. This is the advantage, and this is also entered into the KPI. Right. So this is included in our company. Yes, of course. The KPI is not purely penitentiary. Thank you. My question is also a quick question for others, because we also have some topics about personal motivation. What do you think? Is there any relation? Well, is there any link well, the corporate culture and the office culture is related to the personality of the CEO or the founder, but how important is it for the people who are joining the company? How do you do this? How do you regulate this in a big company when they don't even know the face of the CEO? What is the impact of the personality of the key manager on the motivation?
So I won't be speaking on my own behalf. I'll just uh, share the materials of research, and the research shows that it's the CEO or the owner, if the owner is participating in the operational activity of the company, it's this person who forms the culture, but there are other energy processes, so to speak. So there are subgroups, there are team leaders who also have their influence on the culture of their subgroups. So yeah, I'm a bit relaxed here in this atmosphere. Yes, indeed, there is a dependence on the leader, and I would like to add to what was said by the previous speaker. There are basic psychotypes, as the ones explained by Carl Jung and others. We need to have the understanding of that while creating a team, and we should balance the type of the leader with the types of other people who are heads of departments. If you do not do that, it may happen that the difference is huge. And also we need to take into account the life cycle stage of the company, and they also demand different types of leaders. If we do not look deeper into that, it may happen that the entrepreneurial leader could be kind of bully, suppressing other entrepreneurial types in the company. Or if the leader prefers stability, they may establish a funeral or kind of stability. So everything depends on the leader and leaders of departments. We need to look carefully into those issues. Otherwise, we will just depend on luck. And this is not a place for luck. It's math. Uh, Everything has already been invented and described quite well in the literature. A lot depends on the leader. The leader has to begin with discovering things about themselves, and this process is at times quite unpleasant. So they need to realize that they are non-different from others, and they also have things to work on. I fully agree with the fact that a lot depends on the leader, on the manager, especially on their values. This is not only about technologies, but it's also about physiology. So there was an experiment on chimps, and they trained the monkey how to pull a banana out of some complicated mechanism, and the chimp came to their tribe members with a banana, and if the status of the chimp was low, everyone would just grab the banana away from him. And if that chimp happens to be the leader, they would learn from the leader how to pull the banana for themselves. We have a kind of a similar mechanism. Even the internal values, not only the actions of the leader, are in a way mimicked by leaders of the next level, and so on and so forth. Each person, of course, adds some individual layer to that, but the main principles, the main values are cascaded from the top. And this relates not only to strictly job-related things. Sometimes even the hobbies, the lifestyles are in some inexplicable ways copied. So for instance, in our company, almost no one smokes. It's not like I somehow persuaded each particular person, and it's not something that is defined in our rules, but this is subconsciously copied by everyone. And if there are problems in the company, it may well be that these problems are coming from you, the leader. Yes, I will agree with you. A very good example about chimps. And as far as I noticed, In a big company, you are not directly involved in the activity. The majority of people never interact with you, but the role of the leader, of the chief executive officer in a major company is still very important because we are setting an example for others. There is something that you probably don't remember. In big Soviet organizations, there were two separate dining rooms. Dining room for lay personnel and dining room for the layperson, and dining room for the CEO. So there was a hall with a special service. So sometimes this was used for special guests as well, and this is understandable, but they always used it, the CEOs. They never ate together with the blue collars. The same was true even for toilets. The boss would sometimes have their own bathroom, and they would never go to the same one as an ordinary person did. And even though you are doing great at your job, you are still perceived as someone who is far away from regular people. Also, you can look at the example of the famous big IT companies. Even if the person is not directly involved, when they start being involved in other things like collecting cars or doing charity, it automatically happens that these values start spreading throughout the company. People are more relaxed throughout the company, and it's not like someone consciously decides, okay, from now on we will not work to such high standard. It just happens. And for instance, if you are eating together with everyone in the same cafeteria, uh, and also you are setting example in other things. Yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious that the emotional, psychological condition of the chief manager has quite a lot of influence on the business in general. All of us have been in this business for quite a while. Of course, it happens that sometimes we have a different mood, sometimes we have a kind of a burnout, but the company has to continue, has to grow even. So I would like to hear your advice, your recipes for success. How long can it continue that a person is depressed as a leader? Yes, we can begin with me if you want. So this is what may happen if you begin with me. Actually, my character is quite free from any negative states. It may happen that this happens. Actually, I started working in this business not because I intended to. Sometimes I have these doubts about why exactly I'm doing this. And in those moments, I'm not too much interested in what I'm doing. And in those cases, I allow myself to relax a little bit, to do completely nothing. This does not impact the activity of the company. All the processes are well defined. But if I have this kind of a mental state, I'm just reading a book until I relax enough and I decide that I want to work. It may last for 4 or 5 days, and actually, this is not a long time, and I practice lots of things that prevent burnout, that enable recharge in my batteries. I'm thankful for every day I have, and this is something that actually helps me to remind myself that I have lots of things to be thankful for. And have you ever had any long depressions when you are staying in bed with a book longer than 4 days? Well, if I do have them, then I stay in bed longer until it starts to have any influence on the company. But I never had any situations like that. My character is much more active than that. But we are suddenly understanding that you cannot be full of negative emotions and to be the manager of the company for a long while. Any other recipes? I perform a kind of self-diagnostics. It may happen that everyone else already sees that you're tired and you don't, and you start destroying what you have created. So I analyze myself on a physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual level, and I check if I'm okay on each of those levels. So if Tatiana is staying in bed with a whodunit book, this can relate to the physical level, maybe also some emotional burnout if you've been talking to too many people. Yeah, in this case, we can stay alone for quite some time. So it also depends whether you are introverted or extroverted. I have never tried reading those whodunits, but maybe there is some intellectual component there as well. And as for the spiritual part, well, that's pretty much limited to one's own choice. For every person, it may be quite different. So on each of the four levels, we can test ourselves and see whether we lack in something. So if emotionally speaking, we feel that we are some kind of a robot, we do not express our emotions. Well, maybe we need to spend more time with the family. Intellectually, when we are not learning new stuff, again, the brain is not establishing new connections. Again, there is this need. And there is a spiritual part. Some people prefer mixing with nature, animals. Some people go to church, listen to some classical music. Some people read the Bible, etc. I do all of that, and I also do yoga. I can do everything until it helps, because these are the many doors to the same room. Yeah, maybe you can access this room through yoga. So are you testing all the alternatives, like you read the Bible and drink some vodka? Yeah, I do like vodka, but this is a dangerous tool. So you are skipping vodka, but testing everything else. Yeah, maybe a glass of wine would be a better option, because vodka can only bring you back to a deeper depression. Yes, there are situations when you get tired and when you miss the right moment, when you desperately needed relaxation, and in such situation it takes lots of time to recover. As, for me, staying for some time on my own, just reading a book, watching a movie, this is something quite helpful. And also, if I go away from the city for a weekend, this is also quite helpful. I do not object if my friends want to visit me there, but I just prefer staying there, because if I stay in the city for a long time, um, I feel this pressure of the city. I feel this iron world around me, and I felt this particularly clearly when I had this experience of crisis 2008. So I was in a stress all the time, although I didn't have much work. I just felt this emotional pressure everywhere, although I was alone and no one was talking to me. So I thought that this was caused by some uh, problems in my activity, but no, once I moved outside the city, I could actually relax. And also when I participate in some conferences abroad, I do get tired, but I get tired in a very different way. And this enables live communication and brings in lots of fresh desire to change things. Thank you. You know, there is a joke. How do you relax? Well, I never get tense, so I cannot recall any period in my life where I would be depressed to such an extent that I would want to do any major change. Well, maybe that's because I always managed to avoid such a situation. I stopped well before that, but you know, the well-being of a person, just as it was explained by Misha on the level of energies, um, I try to perceive the same from the point of view of neurophysiology. And there is a harmony between sources of enjoyment that the person is getting. So there are these endorphins which are produced in case of some small stress, let's say of a cold shower. There are dopamines in case you are experiencing something new, and serotonin, which is produced when you are experiencing bonding with friends. So this is something that was described by philosophers long before our age, but they just didn't have the understanding of how it functioned on the level of neural cells. So you could be experiencing the same things every day. Of course, there would be no enjoyment in this case, but if you are adding in something new, you are not following the same track, and this is a source of enjoyment. Sports, again, that's something important. I don't mean that you have to become a professional athlete. No, just taking a walk is sometimes enough. And one more thing that is uh, important is to have wholesome relationships, and how you relate to your colleagues, to your friends, etc. If you are just staying in the office and if other needs of yours are not met, this can have some very deplorable consequences. And just as Misha has mentioned, he likes to go outside the city. I also have this kind of weird joy. I planted trees outside the city once a month. I go there and I enjoy that, although the conditions there are very simplistic, but this gives me some joy and some relaxation. Yeah, lots of issues here. You are quite diverse in your approaches, and this is good because every one of us is different. But I'm fortunate maybe because I've been involved in this for quite a while, and I'm quite energetic. People are different in their levels of energy, everyone can have this small period when they are down. So, for instance, if I am at a conference and someone had a good time till 4 a.m., like for instance, last night until 4 a.m., they had some celebration in the hotel nearby. My wife heard that, I didn't hear that.
But the first thing that I noticed, there are some days when you are really on the downside, but of course you will try to relax and you reduce this productivity. But if you understand that you are on the downside, you're not doing the intellectual work. This always happens with any manager. A lot of mundane bureaucratic things that are always need to be done, or you shift to some other kind of jobs, maybe some creative activities. Maybe you don't need to be pressed to do the presentation and present the product to the client, or maybe you should probably deal with quality, or maybe do some creative activity. Maybe you don't need to be perfect there, but you might get a new idea. Of course, I agree with you that you should shift the activity with the help of sports, because at some age the resource that you probably think is fine to enjoy when you're 20 or 30, then when you get older it's getting to be more complicated to replenish your resources. But please don't take it as a revelation of you know bastard the religious nature that believes that everything can be treated with 200 squats, because I saw, well, does it help? Yes, there was one person, you know, my a parent in the institute had a student at the institute, so he believed that anything could be treated with the squats. So he had a stomach ache, and then he had these 200 squats, and then it turned out there was the appendix, but he had to spend 4 months in a hospital. But let's get back to the topic. There is no headache over there that cannot be treated with a good run, which implies that you need to keep fit, especially when you get older. It's getting to be increasingly more important. And the last thing that we mentioned, well, I've listened to everyone. We started with Tatiana, and that was nice. In fact, this is one of the features and the properties of a leader. A leader who is not positive enough himself or herself would have more burnouts. Because he and my wife, she is a professional psychologist, she explained this to me. The most important thing in your life is to keep track of the balance. This is what Stas mentioned and everyone else mentioned. The balance looks like that. Every person would have to focus on himself or herself in the first place, because if you focus in the first place on work or other things, you will have the burnout. This is you, then your closest people, maybe husband, wife, children, then parents are in the next circle. Then third goes work. That's very important. But if something is wrong with your parents, with your close ones, you focus more on your close ones, not on the work. And the fourth goes everything else. This is love for your motherland, your party, whatever. Whenever you see that the balance is shifting to one of the aspects, then something is wrong and you need to do something about it to have the due balance. Thank you very much. I believe we have used all of our time and everyone is enjoying the watermelons. And let me invite each of you at 5:30 p.m. to have a discussion. We are talking about the box of chocolates, and there we will discuss many issues like this that we probably fail to focus on now. Should you have any questions, we're still staying here. You can talk to us. We could be gurus that could be sharing our experiences. Thank you for attention, and thank you for this.